Today's episode is brought to you by just an overwhelming amount of happiness and, and passion for 154 episodes. History is made.
It's high noon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to High Noon Podcast, the competitive Overwatch podcast. I am your host, the Blevins. With me, as always, is Deathblow. What's up, buddy?
Not too much, man. It's hard not to laugh sometimes when you do the episode is brought to you by. I could mute my microphone, but let's be honest, I'm not going to hit that button.
You mean tear up and just be overwhelmed so heavily by the momentous occasion of a completely mundane thing happening to people you know and care about?
I got emotional, and let's leave it at that because it's still a true statement. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Oh God, maybe we didn't put it in the notes. Maybe we'll talk about it at some point about how we got. I would put lambasted for just calling out the NYXL jersey wearing girls crying over the Shanghai Dragons. A lot of people were like, "Oh well, you should." People can enjoy the game however they want. Well, I can enjoy them enjoying the game however I want. I'll say that. So.
The free country argument cuts both ways.
Oh God, yeah. No, I just for the record, I doubled down on. I doubled down on that. I absolutely don't see. I see what you're saying, but that doesn't mean it's right. Let's move on. Talk a little bit of housekeeping. Of course, Blackwatch Report back as always. Brand new episodes every week about the Tier 2 and Contenders scene. Check them out. Blackwatch Report all over. Own podcast feed, all that good stuff. Foul Play, new episode coming out tonight. Right after this, we'll be recording a brand new episode of Fantasy Overwatch League Play. I know I'm doing very good in one league and kind of meh in another league. So it's great. I know exactly which league I'm going to talk about and refer to and which one I'm not going to even act like I'm in.
Don't worry, me and A. Smith will talk about the other one.
Yeah, it's okay. We're winning the group one where we're fighting against other podcasts, and I think that's the most important one for sure. We're all doing well in that. And Around the Payload coming back tomorrow. And yeah, lots of new stuff. I'm going to try to keep that bi-weekly, every 2-week cadence for Around the Payload. So we'll be back tomorrow, which is Tuesday, the 5th of March. But let's move on and talk about what we did. Death, I know you had a very heartfelt twitlonger that was in reference to a game that maybe you've retired from.
I did. I'm officially announcing my retirement from Apex Legends. Yeah, I had a joke, twitlonger. I always think it's funny when players are retiring from their the small team. I see twitlongers of players that feel the need to explain their retirement to the scene, and I'm like, and this is the first time I've seen your name. Yeah, so it was just kind of like a joke at that. Plenty of the times it's very, very appropriate. They have big fan bases. And listen, I thought the 3 people I queue Apex Legends with would want to know why I'm going to be done playing that game, or at least mostly done. I mean, I'm not going to go solo queue something else if I've got a bunch of friends trying to find a third. But yeah, just game kind of wore out. I mean, go figure. Battle Royale's dropping into the same map 752 times eventually. Get a little on the boring side.
Unless you turn into a chicken when you die and you get magic and stuff.
You're not wrong, but I think I've got more hours in Apex than I ever had.
Really?
So, I mean, probably.
We played that a lot.
I mean, I was level 50, 60 something in Apex.
You did play Apex. Yeah. You played it well over twice as much as I have.
Yeah, I had 2 weekends where I grinded it pretty hard. But yeah, other than that, I did a PTR pickup group with a bunch of higher skill players. There was,
I was not there.
Yeah, you were not there. I actually checked your schedule to make sure you were busy when we set it up, just so that you couldn't like see it going on and pop in or anything. And we'd feel obligated to play with you.
Yeah, I was wondering why I got removed from that Discord and then invited like at a very specific time. It was weird.
But yeah, no, Frito was there. There was YouTuber Nateson was there. There was a couple other people. We had iPlay, Not Rob from Omnic Lab. We had Blaze and Bob showed up for a little
all
while.
of your cool friends.
I mean, if anybody's wondering, he was literally invited and just didn't show up. As much as I love making fun of the Blevins, you know, this one I just want to set the record straight. We were more than happy to just feed on your worthless play at any time if you'd been available. But yes. But yeah, so we had a lot of fun doing that. Man, it is going to be just absolutely insane come stage 2. We'll probably be talking a little more in depth about that in between the stages, but I mean, I can't imagine Goat survives what Junkrat is just able to output and damage. I know on a sheer raw numbers perspective, the healers can't out heal what Junkrat's doing. There's also a lot of other heroes got buffed. Doomfist felt pretty good in case we get back into a dive meta. Again, this isn't I played Doomfist. Yeah. This is I played with and against good Doomfist that were very happy with how the hero felt. Zarya felt pretty weak. McCree felt really, really good. His ultimate, High Noon, our namesake, is probably as good as it has ever been at any point in Overwatch.
When you could like cancel it and still maintain half the charge.
Yeah. Because that was, it's definitely better than that. Because now it's actually useful in the sense of, like, before it was just like, man, it's really bad, but we're going to give you a little bit of saving grace for if you're smart enough to just cancel it and not use it as soon as you pop it. This is like, it's just going to shred people. People will die when you cast it. It, like, maxes out at, like, so if you hold High Noon for the length of a Baptiste invulnerability field, you're dealing 3,000 damage per bullet. So the Reinhardt shield is gone in one bullet, and then 5 people behind it are dead. So it's a really, really big deal, and it's going to it really might bring Mercy back into the meta just because Junkrat's already ridiculous. Now you're damage boosting it, so it's like 180 damage or something like that outright just from one grenade hit. Wow. It's pretty nutty. Blizzard very clearly went the nuclear option with the latest patch notes and said goats will not define Overwatch League Stage 2, and I really think that's what the state of the game will be. If I had to guess, I would say McCree Junkrat. You're not crazy. That does sound really good for the Outlaws, but I also don't think that that's influenced anything in my decision there. I know a couple of the people agreed. I think we might see a lot of Orisa tanking going on as well. It depends on how good Baptiste actually is, right? Because it's weird. He's got this ability that can be absolutely useless in the invulnerability field. If you place it wrong, things like that, you don't have to really worry about that in the pro meta. So it just could very well end up feeling like, hey, Baptiste has a support ultimate every 15 seconds on cooldown instead of tied to an ultimate. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see the way everything shakes up. Again, we'll talk in more detail about that. Once we have more numbers, it'll be on the live servers by the time we can really talk about it. So we'll have some more concrete evidence to some of these things, but expect season 2 to be drastically different is basically my big takeaway from this weekend. Because I don't see how Goats honestly survives just the sheer damage output that's going on right now on PTR.
So with that predicting that we might see a McCree Junkrat Mercy meta, we need to start brainstorming names so that we can be the first people to call it that, and then just start sending messages to Hexagrams and Uber every night, be like, hey, this is what the new comp's called. Make sure you guys call it that on the broadcast. I don't know why I said it in that voice, like Danny DeVito playing the Penguin.
Jamotes. let's go with Jamotes. I think Jamotes. Junkrat McCree Goats.
But what about it is goats?
Jamotes. What about any of the things we call goats? It doesn't matter. That's the thing. It's going to be called goats no matter what we do, Blevins. So if we don't choose a goat's name,
let's call it Jamokes.
Jamokes. If we don't call it a goat's name, then our term will never be used. Also, for what it's worth, You guys were here last week. You know I'm the one that coined boats. And Jane did a PTR pickup group stream, and I heard multiple pros calling boats. So let's hope that takes off.
Yeah.
Because I want to be able to point back to it and be like, ha, this was 5 minutes after the hero was released, and I was already making reference to a How I Met Your Mother episode.
Yep. I hope that both boats and now the newly coined phrase jamokes also lives on. I hope that does. But we will certainly be talking more about that as those come closer to Overwatch League. But speaking of Overwatch League, let's get right into... I almost had it. It's tournament talk. Let us go over the awesome matches that happened in Week 3 of the Overwatch League in Season 2. Starting off on Thursday, we had Philadelphia Fusion beat the Washington Justice 3-1. Boston Uprising taking out Seoul Dynasty 3-1. And the Guangzhou Charge eking out a victory 3-2 over Florida Mayhem. Last match of that day was the San Francisco Shock winning 3-1 over the Hangzhou Spark. Moving on to Friday, London Spitfire take a 2-1 victory over the Los Angeles Gladiators. NYXL, in my own personal Sophie's Choice, win 3-1 over the Toronto Defiant. Vancouver Titans continue their undefeated streak, 3-1 over the Los Angeles Valiant, and the Shanghai Dragons. Now, I'm going to get emotional here. Double the number of wins they have with a 4-0 victory over the Chengdu Hunters. Sorry.
First time in franchise history they've ever won 4-0 Blevins.
It's true. History was made. That is the first time that Shanghai Dragons have won 2 games. This is the first time they've won consecutive games.
Back to back.
Back to back. It has never happened in the history of Overwatch League that the Shanghai Dragons had gotten 2 wins in a row. I hope
worst 2-12. Worst 2-12. Worst. Oh, sorry.
I really hope you guys feel like we're beating a dead horse, because we're going to continue to do so. Moving on, the Atlanta Reign 4-0 dumpster the Paris Eternal. Houston Outlaws 3-1 over the Florida Mayhem. San Francisco Shock 4-0 versus the Shanghai Dragons. And in a feat of history being made again, the Dallas Fuel give the Shanghai Dragons their first loss after a win ever. 3-2. Dallas Fuel. Moving on to Sunday, Toronto Defiant win 3-1 over the Boston Uprising. Hangzhou Spark take out the LA Gladiators 3-1. Guangzhou Charge win 3-1 over the LA Valiant, and the New York Excelsior finish out the week 3-1 over the Seoul Dynasty. I'll give you the top and bottom. Actually, let's give you the whole standings here. As it sits, we have NYXL and Vancouver Titans at the top of the pack. X and O, with the NYXL, I guess, technically having a 2-game lead over them. 6-0, 4-0. And then we have the Atlanta Reign at 3-1. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams at 3-2. Those, of course, are the San Francisco Shock, Guangzhou Charge, Philadelphia Fusion, Toronto Defiant, and London Spitfire. Those would make up your stage playoff teams if the stage ended today. However,
the Dallas Fuel are also 3-2. There's a 6
right.
team. Standings are weird.
True, standings are weird, but those would be your top playoff cutting teams there. Then we've got the Paris Eternal at 2-1, the Dallas Fuel at 3-2, Hangzhou Spark 3-3, Chengdu Hunters 2-2, Seoul Dynasty at 2-3, Shanghai Dragons at 2-3, Boston, Houston also at 2-3 as well. LA Gladiators and Florida Mayhem at 1-4, and rounding out the pack, we've got Washington Justice and LA Valiant, both winless thus far. Whew. So let's start with some stories here. If you heard that last bit I put, it was LA Valiant at a whopping 0-5 right now, and the LA Gladiators not looking too much better, 1-4. what in the world is going on with these teams? And I think a lot of people thought we're going to be at least top half teams.
Well, they certainly did. I know personally I put the Valiant kind of right square in the middle because that's what you do with the Los Angeles Valiant in power rankings. I don't make the rules. I just follow them.
Yep.
But nobody expected this, I don't think, or very few people expected anything like this. To be 0-5 right now, man, it's rough. We're now actually approaching the territory like when Houston was 0-2 and I was saying like it's only 2 games, it's not the end of the world. We're approaching the scenario here where for the London Valiant, it's getting really close to the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's going to be very, very difficult in football. The mathematical probabilities to make the playoffs from 0-3 aren't good. But at 0-4, it's not happening. Okay, you're done.
Well, they're locked out of this stage playoffs, I think.
Yeah, they are the only team eliminated from the stage playoffs. The 0-4 Washington Justice can technically still squeak in if the math that I heard and didn't do myself was correct. So yeah, it's definitely 2 different conversations here for your 2 LA teams. We'll start with the Valiant because we're not going to get many opportunities to talk about them throughout the course of at least this stage. They're a lost team right now. They took some of the things they had on their roster that were working for them, and they got rid of them. Soon's gone, okay? They took some of the pieces they had on their roster that was working for them and changed them into something else. Kareev is now a damage dealer instead of. Now, on top of that, you take your support player, move him to DPS, and then because of the meta, he's actually playing an off-tank character. Okay, great. So now you've got basically double role switches going on here for Kareev that I think is compounding a lot of his ability to get comfortable and make a big impact. But his Zarya play is certainly an issue for them. They've got support players that are too intelligent and know the meta too well to participate in team activities and play for them. So they're splitting time between Custa and Kuki on main tank. The coaching staff, the organization as a whole seems lost. It's surprising to me because this is a team that we said that about after stage 1 last season, and they were fine compared to this, at least. They made some drastic changes. They switched Kareev's role. They ended up undoing that switch and putting him back to support. But at the time, we didn't understand exactly what was going on with them, why they were doing these things, but it worked. So they seemed like a team that had a plan, and they were putting it in motion.
Right.
And it was whether we saw it in the same way they did at the beginning. Clearly last year they were right. This time around, very clearly, they don't really know what they've got going on here. They look like right down there, honestly, with the Justice, when you see as far as just mistakes that are being made, holes in their gameplay, it's ugly. And it's really hard to see them pulling out of it in this meta, which they just seem horribly ill-equipped for. I don't think they're done on the season as far as can't compete. But if you go 0, to me, 0-6 is the dividing line. Because in the NFL, it's 0-4, and you're basically done. It's happened a couple times, but they play 16 games. We play 28, so you get a little more leeway. You can start a little bit farther off, but not much farther off. You certainly can't go to 0-8 and still expect to be fine because we don't play double the games, but it's close to that. So 0-6, 0-7 is really going to be the dividing line for the Valiant, where it's like, all right, we're not going to get it done this year. So what, really think about the future. Maybe they're going to start playing KSF soon or something along those lines. We'll have to wait and see. But really, they only got one piece that's working for them right now, which is surprising, and that's Izzyaki. He seems to be really standing out and performing well in spite of the chaos and just failure that's around him. The tank line's fine, but not what we got last year. And it could be because of the support play, but honestly, I think it's just the meta. I don't think they like it. I don't think it agrees with their players, and I think it's just really, really hurting them right now. The Gladiators, on the other hand, are a completely different story to me. They're a team that is just burying themselves instead of ill-equipped for the situation. There's a lot of substitutions going on for this team now. Maybe not a lot as far as in-game. And they've had a lot tougher opponents, I think, than the Valiant have had, too. So some of their losses are a little more explainable.
The Valiant have played the 2 top teams.
Yeah, not all of them are explainable, but some of them I think certainly are. Losses to Vancouver and New York are nothing to panic over. as you said, since they've played both of them, that, kind of explains two of them, right? Like they weren't going to win them no matter how good it turned out, or weren't likely to win them, knowing what we know about these teams now. So I'm not really concerned too much for the Gladiators, but again, we're approaching the territory 1-4 it's a bad look, and map differential is bad. And when you fall behind, you really need the map differential to be pretty good. With them at -5, it's a really rough spot. Houston above them is -2. So now they need to win a 4-0 in order to make up the map differential there, even if they get the map wins. And Houston's going to be able, they play the Valiant next. So presumably their map differential and their record's going to get a little better. You guys know how it works. You've got to come from behind. You've got to win games you're not supposed to win when you fall behind like this. And it becomes very difficult to do that. So the Gladiators are probably fine. I don't like what they've done with their DPS players now that Decay has become active. They're using him instead of Surefour. And to me, that's just leaving one of your two best DPS players on the bench. Yeah. And maybe it's the meta call. I don't know exactly. To me, as good as Decay looked, and he looked pretty solid, it should be Decay and Surefour out there to me. I can't imagine Surefour is incapable of playing Brig, considering he can play just about every hero on the roster to at least a passable level. Maybe Hydration's a little bit better, but how important is Surefour to your calls? Because we kind of saw that last year, even though they were effective substituting their DPS players in and out, they looked better to me when Surefour was out there, so I wanted them to substitute Asher and Hydration. And then I think Silk Thread joined them late in the year, so it was leave Surefour in, substitute pieces around them. Now I think it should be basically Surefour and Decay out there almost the entire time, with Hydration coming in maybe in a map if you've got something that's very niche in his hero pool, which is a little bit specialized, that's really needed. Then I think you pull him out and get the maximum value out of him. But yeah, the Gladiators, probably nothing to panic over. It's definitely a 1-4 record you need to be nervous about. But when we look, they're 2 games out of 4th place here. That's kind of one of our other talking points, and we might as well just move right into it. 1 game separates 4th place from the San Francisco Shock and the Houston Outlaws, which are in 16th place. If Houston goes out in 4-0s, San Francisco goes out and gets 0-4'd, those teams will flip. And that's an insane jump in the standings right now. Granted, small sample size, 3 to 5 games for these teams. But it is just really highlighting the parity that we have here, how close everything is. That's a big part of why the Gladiators don't need to panic. Is they might be at 1-4, and that's dangerous, but they're only 1 game back from being right in the thick of things. They're definitely part of the dividing line here, where things get really murky. That starts right after Houston, where these teams are probably in some trouble. But there's enough talent here for the Gladiators. I think Roar's looked pretty good. I think Void's been very good for them this season so far. Their support line is obviously great. Shaz has been one of the standout, at least from a fantasy perspective and a statistical perspective. He's been an absolute beast for them. So it's going to be a little interesting to see exactly how they rebound. But yeah, they had a tough stage schedule-wise, and it's going to get easier for them as time goes on. The Valiant, I don't know if they've really had that kind of difficult schedule to make you not panic. But yeah, we're 2 losses for the Valiant away from, to me, just hitting full stop panic mode. And in fact, I'll hit it right after if they lose to Houston, because Houston's bad maps are there. We'll talk about that matchup in a little bit. But yeah, things get really ugly for them. If they can't beat Houston on maps they can't beat anybody on, then they're doomed. They're broken at their core, is what I'm going to say about that. I love Houston, but if you're losing to them on Route 66, you've got serious problems, because they have serious problems on that map. And if you can't win that, so we'll see. To me, it's a big test for the Valiant this week.
Yeah, it's a big one. Here's the thing about the Valiant and their schedule. So week 1, they lose 2-3 to the Hangzhou Spark, which is still, I think Spark are still still kind of playing their placements a little bit. They're fine,
but yeah, they're middle pack. We thought they were going to be great, and then beating the Valiant propped that opinion up a little bit.
Right.
But it turns out.
So their next match, NYXL, which again, they 3-2 versus NYXL. So that match was closer. So, okay, they're going to lose that match. Then another 2-1 loss, a close one, to Toronto Defiant, which I think Toronto is much better than a lot of people initially thought.
Yep.
So really, like, so far, like, Hangzhou Spark middle of the pack, Toronto looking like upper side of the pack for sure. They're in their playoff contention, obviously. And then Vancouver Titans, okay, again, not winning that one. Okay, Guangzhou Charge is probably the one that they lost 3-1, where it's like, okay, maybe you're losing to like a lower middle of the pack team. And then here we are. So it's like, yes, they're 0-5, but you flip a little bit on the Spark game, they're 1-4. I mean, honestly, if you flip something in the NYXL match or the Toronto match, they might be, they might be in good position. So I think if you're an LA Valiant fan, like, obviously you've got a lot of downward momentum. You need to counteract that. And you can't make the stage playoffs, but I think you can start putting something together. They've got winnable matches. They're playing against Houston, so like a winnable match for sure this week. And
Houston and Philly this week, so 2 matchups, which is really to me the biggest problem, right? Because if they could, and we're seeing this a little bit, with a lot of these teams, how some of them look way better in weeks when they only have one opponent, they only have one person to prepare for. And then when there's 2, how do they prepare in depth for Houston when they've got to beat Philly? And with their record the way it is, they have to give everything they have to the Philly matchup, because Philly's the stronger team of the 2 on their schedule even right now.
Right.
So like everything lines up. The problem to me with the Valiant isn't not that I think they can't get it back, that they can't become competitive again. It's that the season is slipping away so fast.
It is.
Regardless of how difficult the opponents are, you needed to take the Hangzhou Spark matchup. Yep. You needed to win 2 of them: the Charge, the Spark, and the Toronto. They needed to get like 2 of those in order to really be set up to be that playoff team. Now they're like hopes. They're very, very, very close to pinning their hopes on that wild card weekend. Can we get that bottom spot and just be hot at the right time? Very possible, but with every loss, it just becomes increasingly less likely.
Right. And last thing is, their schedule gets a little bit easier, but it's like, you really want to be in these stage playoff discussions, right? You want to be in the mix for it. You don't want to start off 0-5. You don't want to be, you don't want to like turn your season off and be like, okay, well, I guess we're not making stage playoffs. Let's just try to build out the whole season. It's like, you don't want to do that. The momentum is definitely a thing, but enough about the Valiant for now. Another, I guess, disappointing to some thing that happened this week was Paris. Death. They're the best 3-3 team in the league, though. Death. What happened?
They can't be beat, like Chad said.
Can't possibly be beat.
EU's the best region. EU Contenders is more competitive than Overwatch League. These are all ridiculous things that we heard said after Paris started 2-0.
This team dunks on kids in JV. They're gonna crush the varsity kids. Come on, bro.
And don't get me wrong, they're still doing great. But as
they are fine, yeah.
Yeah, they're doing very well. There's no cause for concern if you're a fan of theirs. But I mean, people were crowning them, the kings of the meta, the best team here for this stage, things like that. And they got crunched. I mean, they got beat handily by Atlanta, who also did look pretty strong. Yeah. So not necessarily a major cause for concern, but some of their weaknesses really looked apparent. And even in their wins previously in the last 2 weeks against the Gladiators and the Spitfire, when the Spitfire were garbage, it looks now like, okay, they beat up on some lower end teams in this meta. But honestly, they were close, right? Like 3-1 against the Spitfire in week 1. The Spitfire looked atrocious in week 1. 2-1 against the Gladiators, who are a 1-4 team. And then to get absolutely stomped by Atlanta, who's now sitting in 3rd, was an eye opener for sure. But yeah, even when they were winning, as a fantasy guy, I was watching the stats. They didn't look great. Soon wasn't a big player. They just, nothing about the team stood out statistically. I maintained a bit of skepticism. I mean, credit where it's due. They've done really well for themselves so far. It's not a fault of theirs that they only had to play 1 game each week through the first 3 weeks of the season. But that's a big benefit. And now we're looking at them playing Friday and Sunday this week. And in week 5, when we only play Saturday and Sunday, they have to play both days.
Yep.
Thankfully, one of those games is against the Justice. They should be fine. And they're still in a very good spot for the stage playoffs. But looking at this week, we've got Vancouver Titans, San Francisco Shock, and then the Philly Fusion are in week 5. So things are definitely going to get real here for Paris now with 2 games coming every week. I think we're going to see them shake out to be kind of that middle of the pack. We're just joining it, lumping them in with the rest of the poor lost souls that are trying to find their way into the stage playoffs. And I think that's kind of where they're going to be here. And then maybe we'll see them drop even further when we get into a DPS-oriented meta. I think this is one that's very kind to them. I don't want to say it's the best possible meta, but I do think the stars aligned for them a little bit to make them stronger now than they will be down the line. But yeah, not really too much to say. Just it had to be noted, right? Like it was a big loss. The manner that they lost was worse than the loss itself. The 4-0 beatdown was eye-raising. So yeah, it's a GOATS meta, and the tank line of Atlanta was just strictly superior to their tank line, and it showed. And that's why I was so down on Paris, even knowing it was GOATS, because I didn't like their tank options, and they even went with the option that I liked the least of the 2. And it's just it didn't make sense, the hot start, but maybe it makes a little more sense now. I'm going to learn a lot about these teams when we see them lose to Vancouver, and then how do they rally 2 days later to play against the San Francisco Shock, who are beatable, and then how do they do the next week, when they have to manage an easy matchup and a tough matchup. There's a lot to learn about this team. They're just starting to feel a hectic pace, right? 1 game a week, very manageable. 2 games a week gets a little tougher. So yeah, we'll have to see. This is where we're going to really learn about them. But our eyes are raised, and Paris is human, and everybody can maybe calm down a little bit.
Yeah, sample size, people. Sample size. Like
there's a reason we say it, and there's a reason we try not to overreact to what we see in the first couple weeks. You have to a little bit because it's all you've got to go on. But at the end of the day, you don't be so certain. There's so much certainty when people analyze and predict and talk about things. And when I make predictions, I'm like, if I'm very confident, I'm like 70-30.
If I'm very confident, I'll pick NYXL to win 5-0, which I do.
Well, you got the one team where I'm more than 70% confident about when I'm super confident.
Yeah.
So that helps you. But the rest of us mere mortals with our human teams, have to worry about upsets and things like that that might actually happen.
True. Speaking of upsets, or at least being upset, we saw an egregious, what I guess would technically be a C9, but I think we should start calling it a Shang 9 or Shanghai 9. Shang 9.
Shang 9 is what Twitch chat's going with, so it's what we're going to pick up and carry because we're not going to be powerful enough to fight against the wave that is Twitch chat.
No.
Yeah, listen, it was as ugly as it gets. They outright won the fight on Dorado, and this was series defining, right? They were behind in the time bank going into round 2 on Dorado. They cap the first point. Somebody pokes their head in to like stall the point a little bit, and it was like a diva, I think, and then zips away. And Jinmu just biffed it. He chased him down. He ran after him. He was the only one on the cart. It was instant. The fast wick. You don't get to forget that for even a second when overtime's been going for a while. And they were. Listen, there was no end in sight. I mean, it's Dorado. It's not necessarily the easiest point in the world to push through point 2, especially when you're rolling in with like a heavy tank comp like a GOATS or something, and you can't hero swap because of the overtime mechanic. But everything was on. I mean, they should have at least gotten considerably more push. They weren't able to do it. It got about a half of an inch after the checkpoint was reached before it ended, which made it really hard to watch the other team. It
was really awkward. I remember we were in a call watching it when it was happening, and we're like, "Why is this still happening?" It's like, "Oh, because they capped the first point, and then like the animation, the door opening, and all that stuff, and there's like a little bit of buffer, even with overtime."
Yeah, it was a little goofy, but listen, there's no way around it. The guy just has to be. It has to have been like a career low for Jinmu, so you don't want to harp on it too much. But I mean, how much did we harp on the poor guys over at Cloud9 for mistakes from forever ago? I mean, they took a beat down, and I think Shanghai with their losing record from season 1 deserves a meme. So I think it's time that the torch be passed and carried over. But man, it's going to be hard not to call it a C9. Like it's instinct at this point.
It's going to be C9 forever. It's not going to be Shang 9, unfortunately.
We'll see. We'll see. Twitch chat was more adamant than I've ever seen them about changing the name. But maybe it's because it was Jane's stream. And it happened against Dallas. So they were very, very excited about it. I'm sure his Twitch chat skewed in the Dallas fan direction a little bit, especially now. But so I don't know. Maybe it was that, but if there's a team that deserves to wear the moniker now,
they definitely deserve it. The problem with it is that even if you say Shang 9, that still has the reference to C9. And people are like, why is it called a Shang 9? Well, it's because it was originally called a C9. Okay, it's a C9. I got it. We'll see. I would love to see it called Shang 9, although I might tear up every time it happens. But
Shang-Mu. Maybe we'll call it a Shang-Mu to just get Cloud9 completely.
Shang-Mu.
Doesn't make sense, but we don't need it to. It's a Shang-Mu.
C9 doesn't make sense either. It's a Shang-Mu. I love it. Oh, it's
Youngjin. Yeah, my bad. Got the players.
Gotcha.
Well, then we can't call it a Shang-Mu, then can we?
Jinmu is from Chengdu. Yeah, you're right. You're 100% correct. I thought that sounded weird, but I took it. Yes, no, Youngjin. A Shangjin is what it's going to be called.
I'm still think it's remarkable how few mistakes we've made with all the Chinese expansion teams. I don't even feel bad about that one. But thank you, Yankee.
Mistakes, no, I don't actually have a transition. Yeah, the last thing we'll talk about, we alluded to a little bit before, is like, stage playoffs are still wide open. If your team, unless your team's if your team is if your team has it in them to rally, they can make the stage playoff. One thing to note that you mentioned earlier, Death, is that we've got a regular week this week, but week 5 is
Saturday,
Sunday only. So NYXL are going to play their last match of the stage this week. LA Valiant and LA Gladiators actually are also playing their last matches of the week. I mean, we're only seeing a fraction of the team, so they got to put it out here. A lot of these teams have to put it out here. Toronto is playing their last match of the week, playing their last matches of the stage this week. So a lot of these teams, it's do or die this week, even though it's not technically the last week of the stage. So keep that in mind to get your spirit ball energies ready for your teams if they're not playing on week 5. So just keep that in mind as we go in.
Yeah, as a result of that too, compounding it, these weeks are shorter. Thursday and Friday have one less match to them this week than they normally do. So if you're used to, getting in and what is it? Yeah, it looks like they start late. It looks like they're not starting at the normal time. It looks like they're actually starting at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time on Thursday and Friday. Mm-hmm. So definitely keep that in mind. It's a slight schedule change and something to be aware of. So you got a little extra time to play whatever games, to queue comp, try PTR when you get home from work those days before you got to be tuned in.
Yeah, they're cutting the first match, not the last match in terms of time slot. So makes sense. Keep that in mind as we go forward. But speaking of going forward, let's break it. Talk about the matches we've got for this week here. Starting off on Thursday, two teams we've just spoken at length about. Atlanta Reign versus the LA Gladiators, playing on Busan, Kings Row, Temple of Anubis, Rialto. I've got Atlanta here 3-1. Death, what do you got?
I'm going to take the same score. Atlanta, they're a team that's together and knows what they're doing at the moment. The Gladiators are figuring it out. I hate seeing teams that are losing when they're making substitutions because it feels to me like they're leaving their best chance on the table, and right now that's what the Gladiators are doing. This isn't a team you want to run into if you're struggling, if you're having lineup questions. So yeah, give me Atlanta 3-1. They're just a more well-rounded, better team right now. The tank line's playing better, though the LA Gladiators tank line is pretty strong. It's hard to argue with what Daco and Pakpo are doing right now for Atlanta. They look like their best players to me, and it's a meta that should let them shine, and so far that's exactly what's been happening. So I'm going to lean on the tank line and call it Atlanta.
Yeah, the only thing I'll note here is I think with the changes with Decay coming in for his first time this past week, I think Gladiators still have a little bit. They still got room to grow here, so I wouldn't call it a flip here quite yet. But if you really need a flip, this could be a flip. And if you're an LA Gladiators fan, I wouldn't lose hope. Atlanta did look very good, but they are definitely beatable.
You're not out of it. They definitely have the talent, the upside to pull it out, get the win. Just hard to predict them with the current state of the teams.
Right. Moving on here, LA Valiant versus Philadelphia Fusion, playing on Nepal, Numbani, Temple of Anubis, and Route 66. I've got Philly 3-1. Any difference in opinion here, Death?
I mean, they're two teams that are really struggling right now, but they're they're just totally different levels of struggling. Like Philly, I hope you got it queued up because they're already playing it perfect. I'm talking over it. They're known to be inconsistent, so it's less concerning for me that they're showing inconsistency throughout the regular season. Where the Valiant, we've never seen them struggle like this.
Right.
The Valiant know what they need to do to fix it. They need to play competent Overwatch as a 6-man team and work together and maximize their talent, make game plans that feature that talent. They're like Atlanta to me in the sense that this should be a good meta for them because the strength of their team is the tank line, and that's what this meta should reward. Given the fact that that's true and they're still not having success, I'm going to go Philly 3-1. But this is a pick'em that affects the Houston Valiant pick'em here too, right? Like this would signify a switch in that one potentially. So sticking with Philly for now, but it could be wrong. Like the Valiant don't have to be anywhere near as bad as their 0-5 record is. I just think they might be.
Yeah, I mean, like I pointed out earlier, like you flip a couple of coins here and there. You go, oh, they played. I think arguably one of the hardest schedules so far, depending on where you put Charge and Shock, or sorry, not Shock, Charge and Spark. They certainly haven't had an easy road here. I think they just need to flip a couple of things, and we're having a completely different conversation about LA Valiant. Philly feels to me right now like Shock and Gladiators felt in stage 1 and 2, kind of. Not that they're necessarily terrible. LA Gladiators maybe not the best example. Not that they're necessarily terrible, but like I'm not impressed by the games that they're winning. They're not necessarily getting dumpstered. They're just kind of middle of the road. They're 3-2 right now. They very easily could be. I mean, I could easily see potentially Philly being in the same spot as Valiant. I mean, they lost to the Florida Mayhem, if I recall correctly. Is that right?
They did, but Elk was in, like Boombox was out that week.
Sure.
But I mean, one thing I will say is that wasn't the case this week. Boombox was back, and they still looked really iffy. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm gonna go farther than I've gone before and say Sato's playing not as good as Fraggy. Sato's playing poorly right now. Yeah. He's not doing well. He's playing bad. And they need to make that switch, I think, in order to really get things turned around. Yeah. But it to me has been the play from minute one has just been like, don't do this to yourself. So I don't expect them to make the switch, but if they do, I think it really could make a big difference for them.
It's so weird. It's so weird. It's so weird because I could see if it were like a Milton or an IDDQD situation from last season, like, okay, you've got players on your team that you're just not going to play for whatever reason, fine. But they made cuts, and they made, Snillo is a two-way player. Like they've done that with players. They didn't need to keep Fraggy. He's just there and not playing. And what meta or scenario is more apt for Fraggy than the one that we're in right
if
now?
This isn't it, one doesn't exist. Right. You're 100% correct.
Unless he completely switched unless he knew about Baptiste for months and has just been like, I'm going to be playing Baptiste. That's not what he sounds like.
And they have a proven track record and familiarity with the guy as a player on that team. They know they can
a long time with him.
The same general win rate with just switching. They've got more time still right now with Fraggy than with Sato.
True.
So just play Fraggy, forehead. I don't understand.
Hashtag put in Fraggy.
You cowards.
You cowards, yes.
But yeah, I mean, listen, if you needed any more convincing, me and Monty agree on something. And that's that the Philadelphia Fusion should play Fraggy. We don't, go toe-to-toe with Monty or anything often, but as somebody that I know all my opinions, I read a lot of what Monty puts out there. Me and him very, very rarely agree. We do. Case closed. That solves it for me.
GG. Play Fraggy, you cowards. Moving on, Toronto Defiant versus Chengdu Hunters playing Ilios, Kings Row, Volskaya, Route 66. So it's pretty cut and dry for me. A team that loses 0-4 to the Shanghai Dragons is bound to get 4-0 again. Toronto also, personal bias aside, looks really good right now, even though they're playing Roki instead of Aid. My blood boils every time I see it.
This is Fraggy all over again.
This is Fraggy all over again.
I'm not going to be able to stop being mad about this. Doesn't make any sense. Aid was arguably your best player for your first 3 games, and now you've benched him. It doesn't make – and Roki was, to me, obviously the worst. Yeah. Not that he was terrible, but just mistakes came from him.
A lot of mistakes. Just sloppy play. Sloppy play.
Yep. It's silly to me.
Well, I think they were forced by the other team when they realized that he was the weak spot. Not necessarily unforced. Some of them were unforced for sure, but like bad positioning. And yes, I get it. Main support play does not necessarily equate flex support, which is what Aid was playing. But Aid looks so good, and maybe he's just not comfortable playing Lucio.
If he's that good on his off role, like the job he doesn't normally play, I think as a fan, I feel like we should get to see what he can do on main support. Listen, I know we like them. I hope they like us. I'm sure they know about my Lord bet with Thornrain, and they're just trying to help me out. I don't mind losing Lord bets, Toronto. I just want you to know, as much as I appreciate the thought and not wanting me to lose that bet to Thornrain, it's okay. I want you to win more than I want to win our silly little prop bet about fantasy. You can try. You can try.
It's okay to not use Roke. But that was really bad. And speaking of really bad, I think that the Toronto Defiant are going to beat up on the Chengdu Hunters really bad. 4-0.
Book it.
Got there.
4-0.
All right, so for day one, I think it's probably not a first, but day one, the High Noon Podcast unanimously agrees across the board. So let's move on to Friday. Paris Eternal versus the Vancouver Titans. Ilios, Noombani, Horizon Lunar Colony, Rialto. I think we're very quickly approaching almost NYXL status of show me the loss before I pick it. Until it's NYXL, in which case I know which camp I'm in. But Paris. We talked at length about them, so we don't need to go into it. But Vancouver looks untouchable right now. I got them 3-1.
I'll give them that status in this meta, where they were playing it much more recently than all the Overwatch League players were and all those things. And I don't think, listen, it's hard to imagine a meta where these guys are objectively bad. Right. We never expected them to be bad, but we maybe didn't expect this, so we're trying to adjust to it a little bit. I don't really know exactly. It's still a bit of a small sample size. Again, 2 less games than New York, but obviously that's not a negative. They're just winning the games that are on their schedule.
Right.
With convincing fashion. So I'm going to give them the win here. I think Paris is a strong team in this meta. I think Bumper is prone to getting a little excited, making a few too many mistakes. Maybe that gives Paris a map. So I'll call it 3-1. But again, I'm not actually held to the map score, just the winner. Yeah. So it's easy to hand over maps like that.
Yep. So moving on, Hiding Podcast still in agreement. No need for the coin yet. Well, we've got NYXL versus the San Francisco Shock, Busan, Noombani, Volskaya Industries, and Dorado. Now we're talking about the team that coined the rule, or the philosophy. Show me the loss before we start picking it. I'm, of course, going with the patented 5-0 here for NYXL.
San Francisco's a good team. I think they can compete. A lot of teams have taken maps off New York this stage. Granted, Mono maybe didn't look as good as he did last week, but it's really, it's hard to look as good as he did last week again the next time. Still looks really strong. Yep. If he's playing like that in this meta, this is not a team that I think gets beat by mid-table teams, which is what San Fran needs to be considered right now. But I'll give him a map, 3-1 New York.
Yep. Next up, we've got the run back here after the Shang 9, Dallas Fuel versus Shanghai Dragons again. The first time we've seen this. History is in fact being made, folks. We're seeing the run back to back weeks, the same matchup. Nepal Hollywood, Temple of Anubis, and Route 66. I'm the coward. I'm a coward here. Dallas showed me. I'm flipping it. 3-1 Dallas.
Dallas showed me that they deserved to lose that match, and they had no business getting to map 5 to pull out the win, though they were, I do think they're the better King of the Hill team, so if this does go to 5 again, I think Dallas is going to get the advantage, but Shanghai was, to me, the better team in that matchup. Didn't do enough to win. Obviously, Youngjin screwed the pooch, really, just no other way around it. The mistake he made was there. It's not a mistake you repeat, certainly not in back-to-back weeks. Without real good map stats to really compare these teams, I just have to think my eye told me Shanghai was the slightly better team of the two, so I'm going to give Shanghai the win here 3-1. But again, Dallas is the better Koth team, so they get that second map and push it to 5, and I do think they get it.
So which means, for the first time this week, we have disagreed, which means we need the patented coin.
I already flipped it, but who do you want to be heads?
Heads is Dallas.
Tails.
Ooh, tails never fails, which means the Shanghai Dragons.
Loves the Dragons.
Yes, the coin does, in fact, love the Dragons. We'll see if the Dragons love the Dragons this week, though. Moving on to Saturday, we've got LA Valiant versus Houston Outlaws, Busan Numbani Volskaya Industries, Route 66. It's real tough to pick LA Valiant here. I do think, like I said multiple times before, LA Valiant is probably better than their record shows. But with that being
something's
said,
up.
Something is definitely up, and it is not their win rate. I'm going with Houston here, 3-1.
I'm a big believer in my map theory with Houston. As you all know by now, 2 of these maps are bad maps for Houston, but I have to think just massive organizational shortcomings and roster failures is probably worse than having a couple bad maps. I'm going to give it to Houston. I'm going to give it to them 3-2 because, again, I don't think the Valiant are such a bad team that all of a sudden they're going to be losing to the Houston Outlaws on Route 66. Houston doesn't have to be bad on Volskaya Industries. They've just opted to be bad each time they've played it so far this stage. I'm talking about just weird lineups and weird compositions that they've chosen to run. The one time they just lined up and played goats, when in doubt, goats it out. They cruised through the attack and just took it with ease. So what are they going to do? I don't really know, but for now, at least, I just don't have faith in their ability to close out Volskaya Industries or Route 66. I'll give them to the Valiant, but Houston has been kind of a beast on King of the Hill so far. That was a huge weakness for them. I think it's going to do wonders for their map 5 problem, which is part mental, part part Koth was bad, but they weren't getting blown out in their map 5s. Like, it wasn't a complete mental shutdown and lockdown. It was, they attributed it to really cluttered and chaotic comms during those big moments when everything's on the line. Their discipline breaks down a little bit. They just start yelling and screaming and things get lost in the shuffle. They've really been working to fix that. Hopefully they do, and they're able to get the map 5 here. I will say, as big a fan as I am, if the Valiant beat Philly, I'm flipping this.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that as well. If Valiant shows some signs of life, we're in for a match for sure. Moving on, Seoul Dynasty versus Washington Justice, Busan, Hollywood, Temple of Anubis, Dorado. The Washington Justice technically have a better record, or are rather higher in the standings than the LA Valiant, but I do not think that the story and narrative is the same. Washington Justice do not look good. They have shown us really nothing that would lead us to believe that they look good, and I don't think that you can pick them to win at the moment until we see market changes. I've got Seoul here, 3-1 or 4-0. It's gonna be Seoul decisively.
Yeah, I'm going 4-0 for Seoul here. Washington has a ton of mistakes. They've got players playing really well, and then they've got players that are just like massively the problem to me when I watch them play. It's not always the same players in any given instance, which is also concerning. But I mean, we've seen a lot of memes about it, but how good your team's supposed to be when you blow 95% of your budget buying your spot in the league. We know they had budget issues trying to sign players, and it's, we didn't like the roster when they finally got enough players signed and inked in order to announce it. And it's just all kind of coming to fruition where nothing is working out, and they're a little bit lost. So hopefully they found some money in their budget somewhere, and they're able to get some mid-season signings going here, because they should be able to see the weaknesses and the holes in their game as clearly as we can, since there's so many of them. I'm honestly trying not to like really drag on them too much, because the players are in a tough spot. They do perform well, like individually they have some decent performances, but they can't line them up. It feels a little like Shanghai, who had Undead who would pop off, or Dia, who was just an absolute animal against Houston in stage 4, but they can't get it together to win. Not calling them the new Shanghai or predicting that for them this season and not even close
History
to that
would
yet.
be made if we had 2 teams consecutive years.
I'm just bracing myself for the first Justice win. It's going to be a ride.
I'm gonna cry
but it won't be this week. So Soul for.
Yeah. Next up, Guangzhou Charge versus LA Gladiators, Nepal, Kings Row, Temple of Anubis, and Dorado. This is almost like a week 4 placement match, I think, for both of these teams. Honestly, I think we're still. We talked about LA Gladiators before, but Guangzhou has had some good wins. They've had some close losses. Middle of the pack, I think, for sure. But this will be a match to really kind of solidify that middle. Are they upper middle, lower middle, dead center? Don't know. Either way, I've got Guangzhou winning 3-1 here.
Yeah, the terminology I was going to use was prove it. It feels like a prove it match to me for both of them. For the sake of the Gladiators, I don't think you're as bad as your record. Prove it to me, please. For Guangzhou, I don't think you're as good as your record. So prove it to me, please.
Prove me your record
you don't get to squeak out wins against Florida 3-2 and have me just be sold that you're a great team. The Valiant win comes with a grain of salt. They 4-0'd Dallas, who was proven to be wildly inconsistent based off the players that are in their lineup. And that was one of the ones that really showed to me that like Effect was losing it or didn't have it. And then Guangzhou is this other, they brought Vancouver to map 5, and Vancouver, you were just talking about approaching unbeatable. So Guangzhou's been all over the place. They've got a lot of really, well-performing players right now. So it's great to see that, but it's got to come together long term. It's got to be more than like Shu just popped off at the in this particular moment. So they win, and then they look really bad elsewhere. One thing I can say is we're getting our money's worth with Guangzhou, right? Like I don't have a rooting interest for them at all, but I love watching all their matchups because they're all super competitive. So I'm really excited to watch this one. But yeah, I'm leaning slightly towards the Gladiators. This is one of the ones where I look at it and the numbers don't tell the story to me.
Right.
Just in the win-loss record. So I'm going to trust my gut and go Gladiators, but I have it 3-2 because that's how charge matches go. And it's close. Like I don't think there's a huge gap between these teams. I just think the Gladiators are a little better.
This is another like Gladiators play against Atlanta Reign in match 1 of the week, so you can base your pick off of that result. If they beat Atlanta Reign, I think this is an easy pick of the Gladiators over Guangzhou here. But even so, I think it's going to be close. But I would flip my pick here if they beat the Reign week match 1. But another disagreement here means that we must come to the coin.
Head for the Gladiators, tails for the Charge. I dropped the coin on the ground, and I need to go pick it up. So I'm bad at catching, apparently. My apologies.
Can't catch.
We'll just go with whatever it is on the ground when I find it.
Sure.
There it is. And it is tails on the ground, and I don't remember who that means. That means a Spark win, right?
That means, well, if the Spark were playing in this match, then they would.
Oh, yeah.
But it is the Charge.
I think the casters made that particular error this weekend, too.
They probably did. Coin says Charge, so take that with a grain of salt. Next up on the week, we've got Hangzhou Spark versus Toronto Defiant. I think they're playing on Nepal, Kings Row, Volskaya, and Rialto. I think this is a case of preseason, beginning of the season, we had a team that people rated very highly, team that people rated mid to low mid, and it's very like it's slowly over these weeks they've been kind of flip-flopping a little bit. I think they're both on either side of the they literally both are on either side of the playoff line right now, almost actually equidistant from it. Hangzhou Spark a little bit further down than Toronto is up, but yeah, I think this is a definite placement match for both of these teams. Toronto has looked better than Hangzhou, I think, overall, which is going to lead me to picking them 3-1 here. But this might be a match. This is a match of the week candidate in my book, I think.
Definitely is. The Hangzhou Spark stabilized in my mind a little bit this weekend. They calmed down some and got themselves. Who did they beat here? We got to scroll up.
They beat
the Gladiators. Yeah. They got the 3-1 win over the Gladiators. Yes. So the key to that to me was Gushui played for 4 maps. I've been harping on it for a couple of weeks now. Apparently, since last week, all the communication problems of having a Chinese player in Korean comms disappeared, and he's just completely comfortable now. If the interview that we were treated to was to be believed, it's great to say that didn't happen. You just decided to go with the more mechanically skilled player instead of the easier to communicate player. I think it was the right choice. It was the one I kind of wanted them to go with. Hopefully they don't suddenly start switching again. I think that brings this match incredibly close, and I'm giving it to Toronto 3-2. But again, if I just didn't think Roki's mistakes were going to be there, I would have it 3-1.
Give me 8. Give me 8.
Yeah, no comment. And so listen, Toronto's right now the slightly better team. Hangzhou needs more than 1 week where Gushui's in and they look better for me to be sold. Obviously the struggles of the Gladiators need to be taken into consideration as well. But yeah, I'm going to give a slight edge to Toronto here, 3-2. I think we're talking about 2 top 8 teams with their lineups as they are right now for this meta. So should be a good one.
Yeah, match of the week material for sure. Sunday, we've got the day starting off with the Paris Eternal versus the San Francisco Shock playing on Nepal, Hollywood, Horizon Lunar Colony, and Dorado. I've got Paris here 3-1. They have, they have the smallest sample size possible in terms of matches played, but they've looked at least decent in most of them, with the exception, of course, of the most recent Atlanta game. But I'm giving it to them 3-1 here.
Yeah, I'm gonna go San Francisco 3-2. I will say I flip this. If Choi Hyo-bin sits for more than 1 map, like the last match they played, he was only out for, I want to say, map 3, and Nevix was in. It's a huge mistake. It to me is a very stark difference in the performance of the teams. But I think both of these are really good teams. I think we're talking about 2 upper half mid-table teams in this meta. Again, Paris has the double match this week, which I think is going to bring them down a little bit of a peg here. This is the second match. And if I had to guess, they're a very confident team. I think they can take Vancouver. So I think they're going to put a lot of prep into that. And I think it's going to hurt them in this one. And I really think we're looking at an 0-2 week for Paris. But again, I flip that easily if we're still subbing in Nevix and Choi, subbing Nevix and Choi Hyo-bin a whole bunch. I think that's a big mistake that could honestly be the decisive factor here. So keep an eye on that first matchup for San Francisco. We know they're going to lose to New York. But we can still get information from that. How are they handling substitutions, things like that. And yeah, if it starts to go in the direction of more Choi Hyo-bin over Nevix, I like San Francisco to win this one. If it reverts back to 50-50 or goes the other direction, I'm taking Paris.
Yeah, if either of these teams get the upset in their first match, I think you pick that team. If both of them get it, this all of a sudden becomes match of the week potential here.
Hangzhou Defiant who? It doesn't even matter.
Yeah, doesn't even matter at that point. Next up, we've got London Spitfire.
We disagreed.
Oh, we disagreed. That's true. Let's see what the coin has to say. We'll go tails for San Francisco.
tails for San Francisco it is.
All right. The coin goes with San Fran. Next up, we've got London Spitfire versus Shanghai Dragons, Nepal, Kings Row, Temple of Anubis, and Route 66. I'm not picking regardless of how lackluster, I think is probably the best word, the London Spitfire have looked since the beginning of Season 2. I am under no circumstances, at least at this point, picking the Season 1 champion London Spitfire over the actual 0-40 Shanghai Dragons. It's not happening. Give me London 3-1.
London looks a whole lot better. They really seem to have figured things out. Moving Prophet to the Zarya, bringing Guard in to play the Brig, and having him there to flex to the Sombra has been great for them. The cries and the talk of Gesture not being even an adequate Reinhardt were just massively overrated. Zarya is a huge important player and a huge important piece to the GOATS meta. And when you have somebody that's really underperforming on it, like Birdring was, this is the impact you see. I think going into the season, I really thought it was all about the main tank in GOATS and the way things really pivoted around that. I still think from a calling perspective, they're the most important position, but right now mechanically and just getting damage output and numbers from this composition at this level, Zarya's a huge player in that. And putting Prophet on that has really stabilized them, brought them up to a team that has what it takes, I think, to be one of the few teams that might be able to beat a New York or a Vancouver or something like that. So let's see that keep rolling. Shanghai's not a team that I think beats those top end teams yet. Has the potential to win this one certainly, but I'm not there on them yet. London looks good at the moment. Give me them 3
for sure. Up next, we've got Florida Mayhem versus the Boston Uprising, playing on Busan, Numbani, Horizon Lunar Colony, and Dorado. Like we said last week, Florida had the opportunity. 2 weeks ago, they started showing us a little bit of growth here, a little bit of improvement. We said last week, hey, show us some more improvement, and we'll start throwing you some wins, Florida. They did not show very much improvement this week, so I got to pick Boston 3-1.
Got beaten up by Houston, and I was picking Houston. I picked them 4-0, but honestly, I thought the maps might be a little closer, and they didn't really seem to be. And full disclosure, I was late. I was had plans that day, and I was getting back, and I expected it to be map 1 was done, but the first match was a 4-0. That was the Atlanta Paris one. I had to watch that on VODs, and then this one was decided. I walked in, and it was over because it had gone by so quickly. And Houston played Bonnie in map 1 on accident. There was a copy paste templated save error that put Bonnie in. Not the most confidence inspiring thing in the world as a Houston fan, by the way. Can we get our starters in the lineup, please? Still win map 1, go back to Bonnie in map 4. Tried the Spree Cool Mat lineup. And clearly that 6 had never played together. They did drop the final map there. But it was already in hand and decided at that point. So I'd like to see Houston. You gave up the 4-0 to New York. This is how you get that back. A 4-0 doesn't have to be a big deal, but when you give up map 4s against teams you're beating like Hangzhou, when you're just so relieved that you don't show up at all to Dorado, and when you're starting to play questionable comps against Florida, maybe do that when your map record gets back to looking good. It's not bad, but let's get it good, please. Thank you. Okay. But yeah, this is about Florida, right? So they're not a strong team at the moment to me. They're showing some improvement. They're using McGravy right away, right out of the gates, put him in. I think he's a good, solid, aggressive type player, but he lacks that peeling. It's just not really a perfect fit. It's certainly not a game changer that's going to massively change the outlook of their season from anything we've seen so far. So I'm leaning just towards them not being any different after the tank signing. It was kind of my thoughts when they signed it. Fine, McGravy's good, but there was Zappas was there, and there was players that I think really stood out as being better options than McGravy, but maybe it was just availability. Maybe they just wanted him right now, and then he's the one that was available. We don't know. Doesn't change things overall for me. Boston with fusions in looked pretty strong. Much
better.
He's not statistically lighting things up anymore like I think he did in week 1. But he's pretty strong, and the team, the eyeball test alone tells you that this is a serious contender and a middle of the pack team when Fusions is in. So great for Boston. They got him back. I know the Kraft family just doesn't know what it's like to have rule books rewritten for them, or for, rulings to go massively in their favor for no reason. Nate, can we get the rule book so that I don't have to sit here and wonder if Boston rigged the system or what happened? Like, if you just put the rule book out, everybody knows, nobody can be mad. You can tell Boston to sit on it and spin or whatever you want to do when they start complaining about the two-way rules, because the whole world knew, you didn't know. Anyways, I'm a little bitter, not too bitter. But yeah, give me Boston 3-1 in this one.
Yeah, for sure. Last match of the week, we've got Vancouver Titans versus Chengdu Hunters. Ilios, Hollywood, Temple of Anubis, Route 66. Very, very good team versus a team that just suffered the very first ever 0-4 loss to the Shanghai Dragons. Easy 4-0, clap, clap for Vancouver.
Yeah. The only chance Chengdu has here is just the sheer fact that they can't play goats, and they can't. No, what other team? Like, how do you go out there and find a team that's going to play the Chengdu comp against you and do it anywhere near as well as Chengdu does it? Because as much as I don't think the comp is good or should be like a mainstay, they don't really have an option, and they do play it better than anybody else. So Vancouver's not been able to practice against this, but this isn't teams on the same tier. This isn't a close conversation.
Nope.
I'd be surprised if it was a 5-mapper. I'd be shocked if it was a 5-mapper. But yeah, I'm going to go Vancouver 4-0 here. I don't know, put Repel in the final map and you'll still win 4-0 for all I care.
Yeah, there's a little bit of like wild card factor. Yeah, there's a little bit of wild card factor for Chengdu, but no. That's gonna be it, guys. This felt like a much shorter episode, but was still pushing an hour 15, so we're right on schedule. Felt like
this is our standard length. We're
this
back.
Is what,
we're back to normal.
We're back on schedule, guys. So that is good to see. But anything else before we get going, DB?
No, I think that's it. Make sure you guys check out Foul Play. We had a draft fire off last week. If you guys aren't in a league, like A. Smith joined it. It was like me, A. Smith, the Monkey Prince. We'll join leagues even now. You know, if you're wanting to play fantasy, get into it. It's not too late.
One more.
Yeah, I would love. I have a crazy idea for one that like redrafts every stage, but I kind of feel like I missed the boat on it. But maybe we'll try it going into stage 2.
Let's fire it up.
Yeah, maybe we'll try it for stage 2 or something. Yeah. Drafts are still happening. The platform's still going. You can do partial seasons. Get into it. A whole lot of fun. Get some practice. Figure out what you're doing for next season. Yeah, and we'll help you guys set your lineup. If you have any questions, join the Discord.
Yes, if you're listening live in chat, we're going to be doing it right after this. We'll be going down for a little bit, but that is going to be it. But, guys, that is it. Please remember to check out everything over at highnoonpodcast.com. I know I was playing Apex Legends yesterday, and one of the guys on my teammate was like, "Oh, is that your podcast?" I go, "Yeah." He's like, "Where can I find you?" I go, highnoonpodcast.com and highnoonpodcast on Twitter. So if guy that I played Apex Legends with yesterday is listening, shout outs to you. You made it into the show just for saying something, but dead game. No, you're dead. The game's not dead. Literally just broke the record for fastest acquisition of 50 million players. But
dead game.
highnoonpodcast.com, patreon.com/highnoonpodcast. If you want to be a financial supporter, it really does help us do all the cool stuff that we are looking to do for the show and upgrade the show and all that stuff. Twitter, all the socials, we are there. High Noon Podcast everywhere. But that is going to be it, guys. For Deathblow, I'm the Levins, and remember, it's High Noon.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. Threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change the world one bullet at a time till I find mine.
Jamokes. Remember, the new comp in Season 2 is going to be called Jamokes. Remember.